Welcome to Innovating Clinical Trials, the podcast designed for clinical research professionals eager to deepen their understanding of clinical trials through concise, insightful segments. Join your hosts, Liam Eves and Ted Trafford, as they uncover the core issues in clinical research, reflect on the industry, and challenge conventional wisdom.
Today's guest is Selin Kurnaz, and Selin is the founder and CEO of Massive Bio. Massive Bio is an artificial intelligence-powered platform that connects cancer patients to clinical trials. So in today's session, Selin, Ted, and I are going to talk and explore about the awareness, access, and process for enrollment, learn about the last mile, and provide lessons to tech startups, understand stakeholder motivations, and so much more. It's a really fun one, and we had a lot of fun recording it. Hope you enjoy it.
So, Selin, you mentioned the last mile, and I think it would be really good because there may be people listening who don't understand what the last mile is. So let's take a minute and let's talk about the last mile.
Can I just also add, this would be great to get your perspective on, Selin, is the last mile the right the right sort of words, sentiment to get at? Because that to me, like, is the last mile is the last mile, and then it's all over then, when in actual fact, it's probably what we discussed before, which is probably the middle mile of a 3-mile race. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think happy to adapt any wording on that. But the ultimate point that we're trying to make is that after the patient's clinical trial choice has been made, what it is going to take for that patient to actually enroll to the clinical trial. So that gap between the identification to enrollment is what we're talking about: last mile, mid-mile, whatever mile that you would like to call that. And in that one, there are 3+1 things that we are going through. Referral of the patient to the site, and making sure that the patient, first of all, making sure that the site is ready, operational to onboard the patient, and connecting the principal investigator, the treating oncologist, site staff, and transitioning the patient-related information to the site so that they can start their own process. So basically, site staff, multi-stakeholder communication is one side of the aspect. The other one, it's the operational side and the logistics side, how the patient is going to commute to the site. Because cancer patients would like to, based on the information from LaserX Foundation, would be interested in traveling 66 miles in order to go into a clinical trial. But there are a lot of trials where there's not enough sites for those patients, and they have to travel 100, 150, 250 miles to get into clinical trial. And when that happens, how they're going to get there and what is going to be the support for that patient to get there. And also, unfortunately, in oncology clinical trials, you don't just go there just for once. You have to go there periodically for a certain duration of time. And as a cancer patient, there's a change in your life that it's difficult. And then the third part is on the insurance side. And when you also kind of go through this logistics, is this basically in-state, out-of-state coverage? Do you have a public-private insurance? How do you need to navigate in the healthcare system that you're not going to get any kind of a financial burden in order to be able to participate into the clinical trial? And what needs to happen? Because there's no middleman in that sense in order to be able to navigate that journey for the patients. And then the last one, which I was kind of briefly mentioning the last time, is that the importance of the molecular diagnostic testing and navigation of these testing for the patients to get into the trial.
In terms of you mentioned there a few things, like I'm particularly interested in the human element, right? Because as you mentioned before, you've got like this technology platform and you've got this human element. Are you finding that individuals are groups, and this is obviously investors, sponsors, and so on and so forth, are we seeing a bigger shift to a desire to see more AI and those type of technologies as part of the process? Or do you think individuals, groups are accepting that this is actually about people, it's about relationships, it's about building trust and so on and so forth. I just love to get your general sort of feeling of the space of what people are expecting against what actually works, at least now.
Yeah, I think that is more like a stakeholder by stakeholder question. Think about the pharma, think about the investors, and maybe think about the patient itself. When you go to pharma, at the end of the day, they want patients. And they don't necessarily care too much about where it comes from. Is it come from an AI-driven platform? Is it come from a grandma model? Whatever that it needs to happen. They want the patients. As long as you bring the patient to them, it's okay. Frankly, the AI aspect of this is for the patient to have scaled review and for the companies themselves to have that scale and manage it. Because when you basically have that 8 months to pre-screen manually for one patient, there's not enough of headcount that you can hire in order to be able to do all that stuff manually. So AI should be in the background in order to be able to bring that scale. But is pharma, quote unquote, buying AI? Not necessarily. So that's kind of the part on the pharma side. In terms of the investors, they love AI. They want everywhere with AI. But the disconnect is that AI is not a problem solver by itself. AI is an enabler, but not the kind of the end a ticket for the solution. So you need to combine that AI with the appropriate services and access in order for that AI, like a key to open something. Otherwise, you get stuck. And they also need to understand that there's a hard work that needs to go with AI in order to unlock that potential, which they somehow know, somehow acknowledge, but they don't want to invest. So that's kind of the issue. So it's almost like you basically use the AI to do all this pre-screening, and then you put the patient into a capsule and they happen to find themselves at the site and get enrolled, and everything is like amazing.
It's easy.
that world happens in the movies. Unfortunately, doesn't happen in real life. But when they are, loved one diagnosed with cancer from those nests, the first person they call is me, like, oh my gosh, this person that happened diagnosed with cancer, can you help? And it's like, like you are calling someone, you are not calling a chatbot. So then it seems that you need some level of that connectivity. And also in terms of the patient, it's all about the results. Are we basically contributing to their life, helping to improve the outcomes of their cancer journey? And are we doing this thing in a convenient way without, creating any further disruption into their lives?
Yeah. And when I think about AI, as you were talking there, and you mentioned, envision kind of a door that gets unlocked, and the AI helps you unlock that door, but you still have to have someone open the door and check and make sure it was the right door that was unlocked, because it may not have been the right door.
Right. I don't want to be misunderstood in here. I'm a big believer of AI, and I personally believe that we are just scratching the surface. What I'm trying to kind of emphasize in here is that just having an AI is maybe necessary, but not sufficient to enroll a patient into a clinical trial.
It's so, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Selin. It's more, there's far more psychological and human factors as part of this process than just having any smart intelligent system optimize it. There's a reason why we will see site performance enroll on the whole at a greater conversion rate than general marketing, advertising, and so on and so forth. And that's because there's trust that's involved within, I know an individual, I know my doctor, and so on and so forth. We can't, at least in my mind, we can't smart evolutionary psychology that quickly, where technology is going to make way. So I totally agree with you on that point. Ted, any other questions for you, sir?
Yeah, because we kind of started down this conversation now into tech, and one of the things I was thinking about is there's so many startups in tech in the clinical trial industry now, and some of them actually have some great concepts for solving some really big issues, but it's really tough as a startup. And Selin, what kind of advice would you have for the CEO of a small startup, for trying to get their tech out there in this industry?
Well, first of all, it's a labor of love. It is very difficult. As I always say, this is not something that you can do it with your fingertips. It's not something that you can do it in a very, half-baked level. You have to put everything into this, your life, your heart, your money, everything onto this. It's not going to be an easy. In order to have overnight success in healthcare, you need to work 10 years very, very hard. So that's kind of point number one. Point number two is that you have to solve a very important problem, but you also need to know who is problem that you're going to solve and who is actually going to pay that. So for example, in my business, I'm solving a huge problem for patients, but I don't charge a single dollar to patients. So I charge to pharmaceutical companies. And you need to understand when pharmaceutical companies pay for anything. In my basically definition, pharma companies pay for something for only two reasons in the entire totality of pharma. One, if you find patients for their clinical trials, so that they can advance their pipeline and accelerate their drug development cycles. Second, if you find patients for them to put more drugs, which is the kind of the commercial side of the house. In my experience, if you do other than these two, either acceleration of the pipeline versus more drug sales, I don't think that pharma will pay you, even if you bring the world's cutting edge of the cutting edge clinical research. So we have to be very clear about, are you really serving to a pain point? And if you're serving to a pain point, then within pharma, are those pain points are addressed by a single individual or a single title, or is this pain point addressed by 25 different titles? So if that is not the case, then if this is not being addressed by a single title or a limited handful of titles, then the sales process becomes completely unmanageable. And as a young startup, you completely get lost. And then you can't get out from there because investors want revenue. And they don't want a small revenue. They want sizable revenue, especially after they've been burned with these mega rounds in 2020, 2021, like incredible valuations and all that stuff. And the revenue generation at pharma takes a long amount of time if you want it to be a vendor for a pharma. And in addition to that, things have to go well. In the moment, it doesn't go well. It is years. So there is an incredible disconnect between that revenue generation cycle and what pharma pays versus how investors think that, like how long it takes and how much revenue that can be generated. But the thing is that there are certain things that you can measure with absolute values. There are certain things that you may not be able to measure with absolute values. So if you basically generate a $10 million like revenue from a company like myself, frankly, that $10 million is not the same $10 million to generate that revenue from a gaming industry. Because in order to get that 10 million, there are so many, things that needs to happen. But when you are an investor, 10 million is a 10 million. Even you basically try to accelerate the clinical research and advancement of development of novel oncology drugs versus you develop something in the gaming industry. Don't get me wrong. I don't have any bias or negativity on the gaming industry, but I'm just kind of telling you the order of the difference. And since that 10 million is so harder to build then the investment to build that 10 million has to be higher than your traditional 10 million. So because that 10 million is going to be able to do the foundational model of that, maybe the 10 to $15 billion investment that you're going to make on that drug. So you have to be able to connect these monetary values in different ways to be appropriately value and invest in certain companies. But it really, really requires incredible amount of, thick skin, because I've read an article and it was saying that for the kind of this digital health and some of these patient servicing and identification, 68% of the companies have either declared bankruptcy or going into the bankruptcy in the last 18 months. So it is not that easy to survive. It's not impossible, but it's not for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these young, shall we say, technology companies coming into the space don't, to your earlier point, which I think you were getting at, don't actually understand the complexities. It seems like it's a big market. It seems like it's a relatively simple market to solve for, when in actual fact, as you mentioned before, around your 41 steps, process points to take a patient through, it's not going to be solved purely by technology. And I think that, I've certainly got more grey hairs than I care to admit from talking to startups and young organizations about this. So thanks very much for that. Selin, thank you so much for your time. Mindful of your time now, but this was excellent. There's so much information to unpack for people. So just a huge thank you from us, and also from all the people that are going to be listening to this. This was brilliant.
Absolutely. Yeah, I learned so much today. Thank you so much, Selin.
Thank you so much, Ted and Liam, for having me. It was wonderful to have you guys together having this very informative conversation.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and we'll look forward to a part 2, I'm sure, coming up soon.
Sure.
Take care. Bye.